Alright, so it's finally come to this. The day of reckoning, the day of disaster, perhaps, or maybe it'll be the day of true joy, as I think tomorrow evening is going to be our final chance for any sort of Nintendo Switch to mention from Nintendo this year in 2024. If it does not happen tomorrow night, the likelihood of them even mentioning, even whispering the word Switch 2 or Switch successor in 2024 plummets down to a near 0% chance. So if we are getting anything, it almost has to be tomorrow night. Let's talk about it. Hello there, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Botox Games. I hope your day is going well. So I didn't post the past couple of days. I wanted to let everything kind of simmer, everything kind of rest after all of the hype that October was, right? I posted a video, I think on Thursday, talking about just how weird October was for Nintendo. We had so much news, but none of it was the news we were expecting. We had an alarm clock. We had the Nintendo Music app. We had Xenoblade Chronicles X. All of which are like exciting things, right? But they're not what I think most people are looking forward to, and that is Switch 2. Now, over the past 2 years, have been talking about the Switch 2 for a long time. I erred on the side of caution, saying I don't think it's releasing in 2024. I didn't think it would be announced in 2023. People called me crazy. Even going back to 2023, if you look at my videos back then, I was saying, like, I think the most logical time for Nintendo to release their new console is going to be March 2025, and I think if that is the case, it will likely be announced in September or October 2024. Now, those 2 months have come and gone. I have officially been wrong about that. I will take the L. I will wear it proud. But if there is any final hope, any glimmer of a chance for Nintendo to announce this console this year, it basically has to be tomorrow evening. Now, you might be asking, well, why tomorrow evening? That is because on November 5th in Japan, Nintendo is doing their 6 months earnings release for their investors, right? Which is why it'll be tomorrow night for those of us in the US on November 4th. But if you're in Europe, you know, time zones vary. It might be in the middle of the night for you. But November 5th, they are doing their investor call, usually for America, at least for my time zone, so Western time, Pacific time. That usually is around, I want to say like 9 p.m. Pacific, so that'd be midnight Eastern. Usually that's when they start coming out in that ballpark, in that time frame. And I really do think that if we are going to get any more mention of this console this year, it basically has to come from this. And I think what we should maybe be setting our hopes out for, if we are to expect anything, is something of a press release or just a statement from the president of Nintendo, Shuntaro Furukawa, basically saying, hey, we're going to show you this thing in January. That's kind of where my thought process is at right now. I still believe that the Switch 2, while it will probably not release in March because we have Xenoblade Chronicles X in March, and while that doesn't necessarily cancel that out, right, I think at this point we should set our sights on an April release, or maybe May. I know some people say May. I think April makes a little bit more sense. We set our sights for an April release. I think it is possible that at the investor meeting tomorrow night, or the earnings release, they say, in like their explanatory material that they have, they say, hey, January 2025, we are going to host a Nintendo Direct showcase, or a Nintendo, showcase, whatever it might be called, for the Nintendo Switch successor. Stay tuned. Or if they don't do that, they might even just say, hey, the Nintendo Switch successor is releasing in April of 2025 or May of 2025. God forbid, September of 2025. They might just straight up come out and say it. We've seen Nintendo do this before. If you go back to 2016, in April of 2016, when they had their year-end investor meeting, they said the Nintendo NX is releasing next March 2017. That was also where they confirmed that Breath of the Wild would be coming to the platform. That was also where they delayed Zelda Wii U at the time to 2017 because it was originally slated for 2016. So we've seen them do information like that at investor meetings. I mean, even earlier this year in May, they actually addressed the Switch successor for the very first time there. That was the first time anybody at Nintendo had really acknowledged the Switch successor and actually said in any real official capacity that it was coming in the seemingly near future, because at that point, Furukawa said we would hear about it by March 31st, the end of the current fiscal year for them, so March 31st, 2025. So the clock is ticking. We only have, 4.5 months or so before we actually have to hear about this thing and see this thing, given the information that they provided us back in May. If it's happening this year, it'll be tomorrow night. And I do think it would be something along the lines of like, hey, tune in January to see more. It's releasing in April. I think that's our best hope. I don't think there's really much chance of them releasing like an actual trailer for this thing. It's not impossible, but I just feel like between Mario and Luigi Brothership releasing literally this week, a couple days later on November 7th, between the US election happening at the same time as their investor meeting, just about, the night before. I know that the world doesn't revolve around American politics and all that, right? I totally get that. But I do think Nintendo would avoid announcing it the same day as a huge election, right? The Switch was announced, I believe, about 2 weeks before the 2016 election, and that was a very important election, obviously, as is the 2024 election for the US. I just feel like announcing it 2 weeks before the election, that's one thing, right? Like, that gives them enough time in the news cycle. If they announce it literally the day of the election in 2024, I just feel like that's just bad move, right? That doesn't really make sense. So a more low-key thing where they say, hey, it's releasing in this month, stay tuned for, a proper reveal in January of 2025 or February of 2025, whatever the case may be, is possible. And I do think, in the past I've said, like, they need more time to market this thing and they can't announce it and release it really close. I mean, they've kind of in a way already announced it, so I guess that does remain true, right? Like, we've had official mention from Furukawa about this console. Could they show it in January and release it 3 months later? Yes. I think it's weird, right? It's definitely something we haven't really seen from them before because, you look at the launch titles for the Switch, you had Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild was a game that had been marketed for years at that point. People knew Zelda Skyrim was coming. That's what people thought Breath of the Wild was going to be. This big open world Zelda game. People were excited for that, even if you didn't own a Wii U. That was, like, already marketed, right? Like, the Switch had a launch title baked in that was very exciting before we saw it in October of 2016. The Switch 2, or the Switch successor, doesn't necessarily have that same thing going for it. Now, it is possible that Metroid Prime 4 is positioned as that game for the Switch 2. I know a lot of people think that'll be the launch title. I disagree. I don't think Metroid Prime 4 will be the launch title for this system, and I don't think it is capable of handling the launch of the system. It's possible, but I just feel like, given development timelines and all that, right? Like, I feel like we are so poised for a 3D Mario launch with this system. There's not going to be a 3D Zelda ready. What does Nintendo normally launch with their console if they don't have a 3D Zelda ready? A 3D Mario game. Or, I guess, a Mario game in general, right? The Wii U had New Soup U. But I do think 3D Mario will be the launch title, and we haven't seen that. So for them to market a brand new 3D Mario game, let's say January to April, if it releases in April, that is a very short window. However, we have seen over the years, even since the Switch came out, that Nintendo marketing cycles have just gotten so small. And even for their bigger games, right? Like, I mean, we still see them release very close. There are a few examples this generation, like Metroid Prime 4, like Tears of the Kingdom, like Splatoon 3, oddly enough, that, get announced and they don't come out for several years. But we see the opposite now too, where Mario Wonder is, it's a 2D game. I know some people will look down on it because of that, but Mario Wonder is a system seller. That is a major deal. That is a major game coming out of Nintendo. That game was announced and released in 3 months. We saw just this year with Echoes of Wisdom, Brothership, even something smaller like Famicom Detective Club. These games are announced months, sometimes even just weeks in advance. I don't think we live in a time anymore where 3D Mario being announced in January and releasing in April is too short of a time frame. The way that information circulates now between Nintendo Directs, between TikTok, between just social media as a whole, YouTube, you can do a 3-month reveal to release for a console and a game, and that can be enough time. I mean, people are very aware what the Switch is. There's 145 million Switches sold or whatever, which I'm excited actually to have updated numbers for that, as well as some of the games like Echoes of Wisdom tomorrow night when we get the earnings release. People know what the Switch is. They are ready for the Switch 2. You don't have to do as much there, right? Like, people are already anticipating this thing. So I think a 3 to 4 month reveal to release schedule for this could actually work. Now, I know some people might be thinking, well, we usually only get major information out of investor meetings when it's like the big one at the end of the year, right? So around April, May. That's where we had the NX announced back in 2015. That's where we had the NX release date announced back in 2016. That's where we had Nintendo partnering with Universal announced. That's even back around the same time that Nintendo announced their partnership with the DNA for mobile development. I believe that was like a separate event in March, but it was around that same time. We usually don't get major news in like their 3-month earnings release or their 6 months earnings release or 9 months, right? That's usually true. However, last November, we did get a major piece of news out of their November investor meeting. So I will say, even if we don't get anything about Switch 2 tomorrow night, it is possible that we get some other interesting, exciting Nintendo news, maybe a new mobile game, maybe we hear something more about a movie, because last November, the day of their investor meeting, November 7th, they announced the Zelda movie. That was announced to be in development with Sony Pictures. So it's not uncommon, I would say, or impossible for there to be some major news out of Nintendo tomorrow night. Whether or not that's Switch 2 or something else, we will have to see. Everybody thought there was going to be a Switch 2 reveal in October, and we kept getting reveals that were like further and further away from being that, right? We got Alarma, we got the Switch playtest, we got Xenoblade X, very exciting, but then we get Nintendo Music. You know, it's like every possible thing that wasn't, you know, the Switch 2, every possible thing that wasn't the Switch successor was announced in October. Maybe that'll continue in November where, you know, we get the investor meeting tomorrow night and they announce a new mobile game, or they announce the cast of the Zelda movie or something completely random, right? That is possible. I hope that's not the case, although I guess I'll take that over no news at all. I just feel like, you know, we know this thing's getting announced by March 31st. They've said so themselves. It has to get announced eventually. And there's not that many slots left for it to be announced, you know? If it's releasing early next year, it's possible that we don't hear anything this year and they announce it fully in January, though I imagine they would probably want to let their investors know, like, hey, this is our plan, right? We have Alarma that just launched. We had the Switch playtest. Here are our stats from that. We announced Nintendo Music for NSO. Our NSO sub growth is great. We have Donkey Kong Country Returns and Xenoblade Chronicles X. That's a lot of little things, but I imagine investors are still going to want to know, like, what is your plans? Like, I mean, you told us about this new console 6 months ago. Can we please hear a little bit more about that? So I think they don't need to say anything, but it would be very beneficial to them to just say something very low-key and, you know, just kind of announcing it through a press release or through an investor meeting like this, not releasing a trailer saying, hey, tune in next year. That is low-key enough to, I think, dissuade any of the, oh, it's going to hurt holiday sales chatter. You know, I always get comments being like, oh, they won't announce it this year because of holiday sales. Maybe you're right. I disagree. I don't think that's the reason they haven't announced it this year. But at the very least, if they just did a press release, that's not going to hurt anything because the general public isn't going to hear about it. But yeah, no, what I was saying, like, it just has to be announced eventually, right? Like, I mean, I know there are so many other YouTubers and people that have been on this train way longer than me of expecting it to be announced. Like I said at the top of the video, I wasn't expecting it to be announced until this year, and I've only been really expecting it to be announced for the past, you know, 6-7 weeks. I feel like a madman already, so I can't imagine how the people that thought it was going to be announced in 2022, 2023 must feel right now, given that they've been expecting it for, you know, 2 full years, which is just kind of hilarious to look back on, frankly. People take this stuff so seriously. I understand people get tired of talking about it as well and hearing about it. I enjoy talking about it, though. Even though I want to see it and I want to see games for it, it is fun to discuss. And, you know, the moment it's announced, there will be like a little piece of me that's like, oh, it's over, you know? This thing will get announced, it will be over, and then we will move on and we will play all these great new games, we will see all these great new games, and then eventually, like 3 years in, we'll probably start talking about Switch 3, or I won't anyway, but a lot of people probably will. I won't be talking about that until, like, what, 7 years in, probably, you know? I think it is likely that the Switch 2 will have a longer life cycle than the current Switch did, but yeah, it's gonna be weird when this thing is actually announced, and if it's releasing early next year, this kind of feels like the final stop. Like I was saying, you know, maybe they could announce it in January, like full stop, no other hints until then. But I just feel like if they're going to do that, they would say something to appease their investors tomorrow night. And if it doesn't release early next year, that's going to be a bummer. You know, I mean, I'll be playing my Xenoblade Chronicles X, very excited for that. I'll be playing whatever else comes out around then for the Switch. But I just want to see this console so we can see new games. I want to make it very clear, while I'm excited to see the hardware, that's going to be cool, I'm sure. I'm sure Nintendo has something that even, like, the leaks haven't suggested will be on the hardware itself, on the Joy-Con or on the screen, or something about it will be unknown. I just want to see the games. I don't care that much about the console itself. I just want the console to be announced as a means of me seeing more exciting games. Let me see 3D Mario. Let me see whatever Monolith Soft's next project is. Let me see the next game from EPD5, be that Animal Crossing or Splatoon 4. Like, I want to see these things. The Switch 2 is like a blockade. It's in the way right now. I just need it to be announced so I can see these games that I will put hundreds and hundreds of hours into. We need to get to that point, though. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. How are you feeling about the potential of any Switch 2 information coming out tomorrow night? If it doesn't happen tomorrow night, I'll probably make a couple more videos about it. But other than that, I'm pretty much tapped this year because I don't think it'll be announced towards the end of November. That'd be crazy, you know, announcing it right near Black Friday. And then December just doesn't, the vibes aren't right. I've seen some people throw around the idea of a Game Awards tease or announcement. Nintendo might be there. I think that's definitely possible with a Prime 4 trailer or Prime 2 and 3 or something. I don't think they teased their new console at the Game Awards. Nintendo, while America is a huge market and the Game Awards are, of course, streamed from America, Nintendo is a Japanese company. They will announce it when Japan is very present and very aware it is happening, right? So I just don't think the Game Awards really make sense for that. But let me know your thoughts. Do you think there's any chance of a mention tomorrow night at their investor meeting, or do you think all hope is lost for the next couple of months? And if so, when do you think in 2025 we will actually see this thing mentioned by Nintendo? If it's not releasing early next year, like if it's a holiday 2025 thing, then I don't think we see it until March, to be honest, which is, it's going to be rough. It's going to be a rough couple of months if that's the case. But let me know your thoughts. Of course, subscribe here for more Nintendo Switch news, content, coverage, discussion, all that fun stuff. Follow me on Twitter at BoTalksGames, and check out my other YouTube channel at It's Amiibo for more Nintendo collecting style content. I just beat Mario and Luigi Brothership earlier this morning, actually, so expect a review of that over there on a Wednesday or maybe Tuesday. I'm not quite sure yet, but stay tuned for that. And until next time, folks, peace.